Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Chapter 101, Second Star Grass. Hu Niu's eyes were staring fixedly at Feng Luo. She had sensed a very strong hatred towards Ling Han from this human, causing her killing intent to rise. She kept staring at Feng Luo's neck, thinking of taking a bite out of that neck and dealing with that human once and for all. Ling Han reached out and carried Hu Niu, and said, "He's too dirty." Hu Niu was obviously reluctant, shrinking in Ling Han's hold. A powerful killing intent was still brimming in her eyes. Pa! Ling Han gave a stomp of his foot, and a sudden, earth-shaking wail was heard from Feng Luo. His whole mouth was filled with blood. He opened his blood and spat out 10+ fragments of teeth. It looked like his entire mouth of teeth had been shattered with this powerful stomp of Ling Han. The agony caused Feng Luo to tear up and snivel. It was a pain that bore into his heart and went straight into his bones. But because Ling Han had finally raised his foot, he was able to painstakingly get to his feet. As his eyes swept over his surroundings, he felt that all the people here looked detestable to him. Indeed, they all watched as his whole mouthful of teeth had been shattered by a stomp of Ling Han's foot and did not even help one bit. Damn 'em. They deserved to die. However, he was well aware that the current him did not have the ability to oppose the people here, so he could only hatefully cast his eyes over all the people here before abruptly turning around to leave. Naturally, the person he hated the most was Ling Han. He would definitely not let the matter end here. Waihila was also unable to continue staying here, so he quickly followed in Feng Luo's footsteps and departed. Qi Yongyi and the others all frowned. Ling Han's actions equated creating a blood feud between himself and the Feng brothers. This was not something that could be easily resolved. But actually, the moment Ling Han had stepped on Feng Luo, this feud was already firmly established, and Ling Han was already firmly on the opposing side of the Feng brothers. As long as Ling Han continued to stay at the Imperial City, then no matter how overbearing Feng Yan was, he would still not dare to take action against Ling Han. Ling Han held no fear. In his last life, he had been a powerful warrior of heaven tier, though now he needed to start again from the beginning. Did he really need to feel dread towards two such minor characters? He would eventually kill the two of them. Ha ha, the auction is about to begin. Let's go in, Qi Yongyi said with a laugh. This time, thanks to Ling Han, they managed to suppress Wen Haixing and his companions, so he was extremely happy. Let's head in together, Li Xichan suggested. He Jun Chen, Qi Yongyi, and the others all revealed expressions of disbelief. Was this really Li Xichan? The twin pearls of the Imperial City, both stunning and devastatingly beautiful. That's how Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were known in the Imperial City. Li Xichan was not like Lu Yutong. The latter had the image of an icy beauty, always maintaining a distance from those around her, that none may trespass. Li Xichan, on the other hand, was very gentle, but underneath her lay a core made of ice. Though she was polite and well-mannered to everyone, she similarly exuded an aura that discouraged others from getting closer. And now, she actually invited Ling Han to join her of her own volition. This was an inconceivable scene to Qi Yongyi and the others. They were all wondering if they had misheard her, or if their eyes had blurred and they had mistook someone else for Li Xichan. But He Jun Chen's expression immediately darkened. From the start, he had disliked Ling Han, and now, it seemed as if the girl that he admired had some kind of unknown relations with Ling Han, causing powerful jealousy to rise within his heart. All right, Ling Han agreed, without thinking too deeply about it. The entire group entered the Spiritual Treasures Pavilion. In this imperial city, Qi Yongyi's reputation was obviously not as useful as Li Xichan's, for Li Xichan actually had a private room which she led the others to. The room could accommodate 10 people, so it was not too much of a tight fit for them. He Jun Chen started to ask about Ling Han's identity in a roundabout way. Which party did such an awesome person come from? But when he found out that Ling Han actually came from Grey Cloud Town, a town under the jurisdiction of Yuan City, he was instantly stunned. How could that be? A major, important character like Wu Songlin actually wanted to invite Ling Han to tea. He could not understand it. He really could not understand it. Qi Yongyi and the others, on the other hand, had a slight idea what was going on. Because, back in Yuan City, there were already 3 black-grade alchemists that gathered around Ling Han. Though Wu Songlin's status was far higher than Zhu Hixin and the rest, it was still easier for them to accept such an inconceivable matter. Meanwhile, Ling Han was indifferent about what the others were thinking. The only thing he was focused on doing now was to see what good things he would be able to see in this auction. After 10,000 years, it appeared as if a lot of pill formulae had been lost in the passage of time. For example, a treasure like the dark moon grass was actually reduced to being used to concoct the purple origin pill. Then, chances were that there would appear spiritual medicines that were extremely valuable yet used very wastefully. Mere moments later, the auction began. Because the auction today was only the small-scale auction that would be held every month, while there were many participants, not many of them could actually pay large sums of money for the items on auction. As a result, the prices of the items on auction all fell into a reasonable range. Meanwhile, Ling Han was extremely astonished, because some of what he saw as extremely low-grade alchemical pills could actually be sold at exorbitant prices. These people were filthy rich, but very foolish. He was secretly pondering that it was perhaps time for him to concoct some alchemical pills. Though there were still monetary notes of about 100,000+ in his pockets, looking at the generous way the people here were throwing around their money recklessly, a mere 100,000+ silver coins really could not buy much. I don't know how many alchemists are present here today, but the upcoming merchandise is truly a valuable medicinal ingredient. The auctioneer performed with full effort on the stage. He gave a wave of his hand, and a beautiful female attendant walked onto the stage, carrying a tray. There were 3 herbs on the tray, and if one paid close attention, they were actually glittering like stars. Second star grass. Someone immediately called out. Second star grass is actually on auction. This is indeed a valuable treasure for alchemists, but for martial artists, this second star grass does not have much value. The auctioneer cleared his throat, and said, "That's right. This is indeed the second star grass which can be used to concoct the refreshing pill. I believe that most would know of the usefulness of the refreshing pill. It can refresh an individual's state of mind. For a martial artist, this indeed does not have much value, but for an alchemist, its value is beyond measure. For a martial artist, when their spirit was exhausted, they would not be able to continue moving their origin power and cultivate. Thus, the value of the refreshing pill for a martial artist was only extending the time he could cultivate every day to be a little longer, but who would have so many refreshing pills to squander? Even if he had 10, that only meant that he'd be able to cultivate longer for 10 days, and what use was that? But it was a completely different matter for an alchemist. Controlling flames was something that exhausted one's mental energy to a great degree, but some alchemical pills needed a very, very long time to be concocted, and if the alchemist's mental energy ran out midway and he did not have enough spiritual energy left, then what was to be done? It was in such moments that the refreshing pill would come into play. It would replenish the spiritual and mental energy of the alchemist, and he'd be able to successfully concoct an alchemical pill that he had initially been unable to concoct. Thus, Li Si-chan's eyes immediately lit up. What alchemist dared to say that their spiritual energy was abundant enough to the point that they could concoct every single type of alchemical pill? Ling Han's eyes lit up as well. At the same time, he felt an irrepressible urge to swear. That was second star grass, and it could be used to concoct the second star pill. And what were the effects of the second star grass? To strengthen one's mental energy. One was used to replenish, and the other could be used to strengthen. How could they be the same? If it was merely replenishing, then it would work only one time. But if it was strengthening, then the effects were permanent. Moreover, even martial artists would scramble madly for the second star pill, and the value of the second star grass could not be compared to the value of the concocted second star pill. Ling Han was shaking his head mentally. The field of alchemy had degraded too much in this era. Previously, the dark moon grass was used to concoct the purple origin pill, and now, the second star grass was being wasted to concoct the refreshing pill. He said to Li Si-chan, "Girl, let me have this second star grass." Li Si-chan knew that Ling Han was also an alchemist, so it was not a strange thing that he would want the second star grass too, but she needed it as well. She could not help revealing a troubled expression. She could reject him, but this was a person even her master respected, but if she agreed, then wouldn't that mean that she would lose such a valuable medicinal ingredient? Seeing her expression, Ling Han leaned towards her and said in a low voice, "I can sell you a cultivation technique that will allow you to speed up the recovery of your mental energy." What? Li Si-chan forgot their surroundings as she suddenly yelled. Chapter 102, Major Origin Spirit Replenishing Technique. It was common sense that aside from taking medicine, time was the only way to slowly recover one's spiritual energy. And now, Ling Han actually said that he wanted to sell her a cultivation technique that would boost the recovery of spiritual energy. How could she not lose her bearings from such an extreme shock? "Bastard! What did you do to Si-chan?" He Jun-chen immediately shouted, his whole face filled with thunderous rage. When he saw the expression of utter astonishment on Li Si-chan's face, he assumed that she had been taken advantage of by Ling Han. He had a crush on Li Si-chan, and when he had seen the previous intimate interactions between Ling Han and Li Si-chan, he was already extremely displeased. Now, he naturally could no longer restrain his resentment. "It's none of your business, just sit down somewhere," Ling Han said nonchalantly. "How dare you?" He Jun-chen had already been extremely irritated by Ling Han's presence, and now he stood up instantly in a rage, ready to make a move. "Elder brother disciple he, what are you doing?" Li Si-chan immediately stretched out an arm to block his advance, her beautiful face filled with displeasure. That was natural. If there really existed such a cultivation technique that could aid in the recovery of spiritual energy, then its value would be absolutely beyond measure, and would also be something that all the alchemists in this world would go crazy about. Are you actually defending him?" He Jun-chen's expression transformed drastically. He had already been suspicious of the ambiguous relationship between Ling Han and Li Si-chan in the first place. Now that Li Si-chan was actually protecting Ling Han, she caused his suspicions to deepen. "You were the unreasonable one in the first place," Li Si-chan said, displeased. "I am unreasonable." He Jun-chen almost jumped up, thinking, "You adulterous couple are already flirting so openly in public, and actually dare to accuse me of being unreasonable. Idiot. Shut up." When Ling Han saw that the bidding for the second star grass had already began, he quickly waved a hand at Li Si-chan, and said, "Get me this second star grass, and that cultivation technique will belong to you." He only had over 100,000 silver coins, which was definitely not enough to buy these 3 stalks of second star grass. He naturally could only place his hopes on this rich woman, Li Si-chan. If this wasn't the case, he wouldn't consider selling off that spiritual energy replenishing cultivation technique, even if it was only a low-grade spiritual support technique. At least in the vicinity of Rain Country, it was still a priceless treasure. Li Si-chan's attention was immediately turned back to him, and she asked, "You wouldn't be lying to me, right?" "What do you think?" Ling Han countered. Li Si-chan pondered that while this guy was actually younger than herself, his ability had already been recognized and acknowledged by 2 black-grade high-level alchemists at the same time, so it wasn't likely he would be making baseless boasts. After all, the acknowledgement of these 2 alchemists was definitely worth more than a few dozen hundred thousands of silver coins. She nodded and immediately began bidding. As an alchemist, even if she was only in yellow-grade mid-level now, the wealth she possessed was still very shocking. She easily raised her bid to the exorbitant price of over 1 million silver coins, and it still seemed as if it was something very easy for her. Ling Han nodded internally. Looks like this girl's rate of success when concocting pills was not low, and that was why she had been able to accumulate such wealth. An alchemist being in a higher grade did not mean that he would definitely be able to earn money, or earn big money, because this was affected by their success rate. For example, let's say that the medicinal ingredients cost 1,000,000 silver coins, and theoretically, 30 alchemical pills could be concocted from this amount of ingredients. The total worth of these 30 pills would be 9 million coins, so with a 100% successful concoction rate, an alchemist would be able to earn 8 million coins, and that was a profit of 8 times his costs. But, if the alchemist's success rate was only 10%, then the 3 alchemical pills that were concocted would be sold for only 90,000 silver coins. Not only would the alchemist not profit, he would have lost 100,000 coins. The higher the grade of the alchemical pill, the lower the rate of successful concoction, so don't think that alchemy was a profession that earned big money. Whether or not it would be profitable would still depend on the alchemist. The amount of money earned would differ with different alchemists. For example, the 3-fire guide that Ling Han had invented in his last life was able to greatly increase the rate of success, and brought a revolution to the field of alchemy. It also earned Ling Han the revered name of Alchemy Emperor. While Li Si-chan was only a yellow-grade mid-level alchemist, if her rate of success was extremely high, she too would be able to earn a lot of money. Of course, the higher the grade of alchemical pill, the more money could be earned with a high success rate. For example, when Ling Han in his last life had concocted some earth-grade alchemical pills, then no matter how much money you offered, you still would not be able to buy any. You had to trade either natural treasures, high-grade cultivation techniques, or martial techniques in exchange for a few earth-grade alchemical pills. While he was in his pensive thought, Li Si-chan had already successfully obtained the 3 stalks of second star grass, paying the high price of 1,200,000 silver coins. After all, there weren't many alchemists here, and even if there were, they were obviously not as wealthy as Li Si-chan. Ling Han smiled widely. If it had been his last life, it would not be possible to purchase such a priceless item with worthless crap like gold and silver coins. Spending a mere 1,000,000 plus silver coins, he managed to get it. This was an extremely great profit. Very quickly, the staff of Spiritual Treasures Pavilion had delivered the 3 stalks of second star grass over to them. When you give me that cultivation technique, I'll give you the second star grass, Li Si-chan said. The corners of Ling Han's lips twitched, and he said, "Do you think I would renege on a promise to a little girl like you? Don't act so old and mature, you're 1 year younger than me." Li Si-chan pointed out. She was actually really scared that Ling Han would act shamelessly, and take advantage of his younger age to trick her out of her money. After all, this was the money that she had earned through her own hard effort. Fine then, let's return to the academy immediately. Ling Han could barely wait to concoct the second star pill. The sooner he took the pill, the sooner his spiritual energy would be increased, and he would be able to cultivate for a slightly longer period of time every day. Accumulating this extra bit of time over a long period of time would eventually lead to a very significant increase of his cultivation. All right. Li Si-chan nodded. She wanted to get her hands on a cultivation technique like this as soon as possible, too. Ling Han carried Hu Niu, and the group of 3 departed. Ji Yongyi and the others snickered in unison, revealing knowing expressions. Only He Junchen's expression darkened like water. He had already developed a powerful killing intent for Ling Han. After all, Li Si-chan was not only one of the twin stunning pearls of the imperial city, she herself was a very impressive alchemist, possessing a future with unlimited possibilities. If he was able to marry such a woman, then whether it was for himself, or for the clan behind him, this would be a colossal gain. This was his woman, and he would mercilessly kill all who threatened his position as her man. Ling Han and Li Si-chan soon returned to the academy. When they arrived at the place Ling Han was staying at, he told Hu Niu to play by herself while he began to impart a spiritual energy replenishing cultivation technique to Li Si-chan. The name of this technique was Major Origin Spirit Replenishing Technique. This was not Ling Han's own invention. Instead, it was an extremely common spiritual support technique in the field of alchemy from his last life. It was very effective for the recovery of spiritual energy for any alchemist below Gushing Spring tier, but after the alchemist has passed into Gushing Spring tier, its effects would begin to decrease. Thus, Ling Han did not have much misgivings or reluctance, and directly taught it to Li Si-chan. Otherwise, the latter would have to perform 3 kowtows and 9 bows, completing the formalities of becoming his disciple, before he would be willing to teach her the real art of alchemy. But for Li Si-chan, this cultivation technique was indescribably valuable and priceless. Her whole body was shivering, because she was really too overwhelmed with excitement. Can I teach this major origin spirit replenishing technique to my master? She asked very nervously. All right. Then I'll sell it for a rough 10 million. Ling Han nodded without hesitation. When you sold it to me, the price was only 1,200,000. Though Li Si-chan knew that Wu Songlin could easily afford this sum of money, but as his disciple, she would naturally want to defend her master's interests. That's because you're a beauty, so I gave you a friendly price. Your master, sigh. Not pleasing to the eye at all, so of course I'd be selling it to him at the original price, Ling Han laughed. Li Si-chan rolled her eyes at him, but because Ling Han was complimenting her beauty in a roundabout way, she was still very happy. Chapter 103, Sword Heart. Li Si-chan very happily departed, and Ling Han lay on his bed for some rest. It wasn't that he did not want to immediately begin concocting the second star pill, just that he had never imagined that he would actually manage to obtain such a valuable spiritual medicine on his very first day in the Imperial City. How could he have the other supplementary ingredients on hand? As a result, the only option for him now was to wait until the next day to go to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion to buy the complete set of ingredients necessary before he could go on to the next step. Conveniently, he still had to fix up his own courtyard slightly. After all, he would have to stay here for at least a few years, so it was necessary to set up some restrictions in the surrounding area. This would be one of the hidden cards up his sleeve. Meanwhile, Hu had lain down beside his legs like a giant cat, and very quickly, the sound of her breathing lengthened and became quieter. But if there was any little bit of disturbance, she would immediately be alerted to wakefulness, bare her sharp teeth, and growl. Ling Han believed that with Lu Yutong's influence in the academy, she would be able to find him very soon. Thus, Ling Han needed not think about anything else, and went to sleep very peacefully. The night passed in silence, and early the next morning, after Ling Han had prepared breakfast and filled the stomachs of both himself and Hu, he headed to officially greet his teacher. This was the basic respect that a student should have towards his teacher. He pushed the door open and entered to see that Mo Gao was practicing his sword techniques. However, it was very odd. His right hand held a sword while his left hand was firmly held in a gesture. There wasn't any sort of movement from him at all. Was he practicing his sword techniques, or practicing some kind of chi-supporting technique? Hu meanwhile revealed a very defensive expression. Her hands were firmly pressed upon the ground, her whole body slightly raised, her small mouth was open, and there was a ferocious light flickering in her eyes. She was ready to make a move at any moment. Ling Han was surprised. The little girl would only show such behavior when she sensed a threat, but the problem was this movement of Mo Gao very threatening? Wait. Ling Han's eyes gradually widened. His divine sense seemed to have detected something inconceivable. And that was the aura exuded from Mo Gao. It was extremely mysterious. It had a slightly familiar feeling to it, yet he couldn't really grasp what it was exactly. Sword. That's right. It had something to do with his sword. You're here, Mo Gao said. Then accompany me in my sword practice. What sword technique is this? Ling Han asked. It's not any sword technique, but a sword of invincibility, Mo Gao declared incredibly. Meanwhile, Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. He had sensed a very mysterious feeling from the aura that Mo Gao had been giving out just now, and now getting the somewhat even more mysterious way the latter was speaking in, Ling Han felt as if he had grasped something, though it still wasn't too clear. Does a sword of invincibility exist in this world? He asked. A sword in the hands of an invincible swordsman would be a sword of invincibility. Mo Gao said, I am the sword itself. The heart of the sword is brightly lit, able to pierce through every attack, and shatter every attack. Hong. Ling Han felt as if his whole mind had trembled, giving rise to a towering tsunami wave. Sword heart. No wonder he had felt a feeling of mystery, yet this profound feeling was so familiar to him. So Mo Gao was actually cultivating sword heart. He was not the slightest bit suspicious of Mo Gao putting on airs, because the overall level of martial arts in Rain Country was really too low. Simply being able to form sword chi, you'd be named as a ruler. There was no one who had managed to form sword ray at all, so how could sword heart be possible? The heart is the sword that is brightly lit. That was the highest level of comprehension of sword arts. With sword heart, all the attacks of this world would be easily understood and broken down. One only needs to wave his sword once, and all attacks would naturally be broken apart. Who would ever have thought that a swordsman at the mere level of the 9th layer of element gathering tier would be able to somewhat touch the level of sword heart? No wonder that Mo Gao, an obvious genius in his youth, otherwise, he wouldn't have managed to enroll into Huyang Academy in the first place, had all of a sudden gone mad. In truth, he hadn't gone mad at all, it was just that he had already began to cultivate sword heart at that time. However, it was immeasurably difficult to grasp sword heart. As a result, his cultivation had stagnated for these 10+ years, because he had concentrated all his efforts on comprehending sword heart. A somber respect came to life in Ling Han. This was sword heart. Even in his last life, there were not many elite swordsmen that had managed to successfully form it. But as long as one succeeded in forming sword heart, not only would he be invincible among all those in the same cultivation level, he'd also be able to disregard the colossal gulf of differing cultivation levels to kill a powerful enemy at a higher tier. It was incomparably feared. He clasped his hands together, and said, Please share your wisdom, teacher. Mo Gao was a bit surprised. Aside from himself, everyone else in the academy thought that he was off his rocker. Even he himself, in these 10+ years, would occasionally doubt if he had made a wrong turn in life, and whether he really would be able to create a sort of invincibility. And this young man, without any bit of hesitation, was actually willing to join him in sword practice. What deep trust this unfamiliar young man had towards him. When he thought this, Mo Gao actually felt a little touched. He, a solo swordsman with the sword as his only companion, completely isolated himself from everyone else. In the blink of an eye, 10+ years had already passed. He had spent it on sword practice, and even more sword practice. And now, a young man actually held such admiration and trust for him, causing him to suddenly become excited. This was a good student, he definitely had to teach this student well. Mo Gao was thinking thus in his heart, and began to talk non-stop. The art of the sword is like a person of noble character, magnanimous and devoid of even a single bit of vile character. This was the understanding that he had come to through these 10+ years of extreme focus and hard practice. He didn't even care if Ling Han could understand or not, and simply recited all of whatever he knew and had grasped. Yet Ling Han was becoming more and more astonished. Although his cultivation level had dropped, his comprehension was still the one of that powerful warrior of heaven tier that he had been, so naturally, he could understand all of what Mo Gao was saying. And it was exactly because he could understand everything that he was astonished beyond measure. Mo Jay's understanding of the sword had already completely surpassed his cultivation level. Even if he had yet to reach the level of the heart of the sword is brightly lit, he was just a mere step away from grasping sword heart. In a place with such a low overall level of martial arts, and with himself who was at the mere level of 9th layer of element gathering tier, his fingers actually managed to touch the door that led to sword heart. How could Ling Han not be astonished? When Mo Gao was finished speaking, Ling Han simply stood there without moving at all, silently digesting all that he had heard. For any swordsman, this lecture was invaluable. This was not a sword technique, nor was it a martial arts technique at the high level of heaven or earth grade. It was only a lecture of an individual's understanding of the art of the sword. Yet it was an explanation that was very close to the core of the art, directly touching the base. Of course, even if a swordsman had managed to form sword heart, the level every individual swordsman could grasp would differ, because sword heart was based on the individual swordsman's understanding of the art of the sword. But listening to such a lecture was too great a help for Ling Han, who had, at the moment, only formed 5 flashes of sword chi. It was as if there was a path of gold laid out in front of him, guiding his advance forwards. Hu Nu instantly looked bored. Her hands held onto her ears, and she appeared very sleepy. Hey! Ling Han suddenly leaped up, the sword hanging at his waist leaving its sheath. He quickly turned around on the spot and brandished his sword in a wave. 5 flashes of sword chi danced unhindered. Shua, 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 cold light flashed and flickered. But moments later, another needle-sharp flash of sword chi was actually formed, and joined the previous 5 flashes of sword chi. The 6th flash of sword chi. This flash of sword chi quickly grew, becoming longer and wider, and finally looked no different from the other 5 flashes of sword chi. Many thanks, teacher. Ling Han raised his clasped hands towards Mo Gao and offered his thanks. This was not as simple as only having formed a flash of sword chi. He would be able to benefit from Mo Jie's lecture throughout his whole life. If he managed to grasp sword heart in this lifetime, then Mo Jie's lecture would at least have helped him save half the time he needed to be able to reach that step. He had never thought this would happen. The only reason why he had come to Huyang Academy was to make Ling Dongxing happy, yet he would actually have such an unexpected gain. He's earned big. Chapter 104, embarrassingly short of money. Mo Gao was also astonished. In his opinion, any student that would have been shoved to him must have come into the academy through a back door. There was not much future in developing such a student, and that was why he would be wasting his time with Mo Gao. Just now, he had spoken for so long and so much. Rather than saying that he was teaching Ling Han, it was more appropriate to say that he had all of these words stuffed inside him for too long, so he desperately wanted to share them with someone else. He did not consider at all whether Ling Han could understand what he was saying or not. He had never thought that Ling Han would really have understood his lecture. Moreover, after digesting the information he had blurted out, Ling Han very quickly managed to form a new flash of sword chi. If it was only a single flash of sword chi, he could still accept it. The problem was that Ling Han had already possessed 5 flashes of sword chi in the first place. 5 flashes of sword chi, what kind of concept was that? 3 flashes of sword chi and you would be able to claim the name of ruler. 5 flashes, and that was a minor achievement. This was definitely a genius, and it was very likely that he had surpassed all those of the same age in Rain Country. But how could such a genius be shoved onto him to be taught? Mo Gao really couldn't understand. However, when his thoughts took a different turn, he became extremely delighted. Because Ling Han was now his student, and the higher the achievements his student managed to attain in the future, the prouder he would become. Teacher, there are some parts one didn't really understand, Ling Han questioned Mo Gao after he had withdrawn his sword. With regards to the level of understanding of martial arts, he was more than qualified to be the Grandmaster of Mo Gao. But if it was only looking at the comprehension of the art of the sword, Mo Gao was above him. The reasons were simple. Firstly, Mo Gao had immersed himself in the art of the sword for 10+ years, and secondly, he was indeed a genius swordsman. Whatever you don't understand, just say it, Mo Gao immediately said. It had been more than 10 years, when had he ever been asked questions by a student? Ling Han raised some of his doubts, and Mo Gao immediately gave him a lecture based on his own understanding. Through this process, he also obtained a great enlightenment for himself. One has to know that though Ling Han himself had not spent much time on the art of the sword, his knowledge as a former warrior of heaven tier was still there, so the questions he asked were all core questions. Mo Gao continuously made sounds like yi, ya, and oh, his eyes becoming brighter and brighter. His expression was one of both delight and frustration, seemingly unable to contain his present joy. Unknowingly, the time had arrived at noontime. Mo Gao gave a long sigh, and said, "Your talent in the art of the sword is higher than mine." I do not have the face to become your teacher. Let's just do it this way. The both of us will treat each other as friends of the same generation, and have frequent discussions with each other. Ling Han shook his head, and said, in the art of the sword, Teacher Mo indeed has the qualifications to become my teacher. Even if I surpass Teacher Mo in the art of the sword someday, I will never forget the favor Teacher Mo has done by teaching me today. Mo Gao was deeply moved. He would actually encounter such an exceptionally talented student. It was a pity that he was not qualified enough to take Ling Han as disciple. Their teacher-student relationship too was only formed because of the academy. Oh Tilda, who knew, said pitifully, tugging on Ling Han's sleeve. All right, let's go eat. Ling Han bade Mo Gao goodbye and left the academy. He then found a random restaurant, ordered some main dishes of meat and fish, and began feasting together with Hu Niu. If you wanted to eat with this little girl, you really needed to be quick enough. Otherwise, whenever a dish was served, it would definitely be gone within mere moments. One meal actually cost over 1,000 silver coins, causing Ling Han to cry out that he really did not have enough money to spend. This was because the prices in the imperial city were very high, and this little girl really had too big an appetite. He really needed to concoct some alchemical pills to earn money. Otherwise, it'd be a problem just feeding Hu Niu, what more to buy resources for his own cultivation. There was nothing to be done about it. He had just arrived at the imperial city yesterday, so there was 1,000 things for him to do. He would have to start everything all over again. Ling Han held onto Hu Niu's tiny hand, and asked around the people on the streets. This way, he soon found Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. It really did deserve the name of the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion of the Imperial City. Merely the flight of 1,000 steps leading to the entrance was impressive enough to provoke gasps of amazement. The steps were as wide as 100 meters, slanting all the way upwards. There was an extremely glamorous, luxurious giant hall to be seen at the high level of 300 meters upwards. Ling Han and Hu Niu climbed the stairs and entered the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Once they entered, they saw a sweet-looking female attendant responsible for sales walking forward to greet them, saying, "Honorable customer, how do you do? I am Xuanhuan. May I know what kind of alchemical pills you require?" "I don't need any alchemical pills. I only need some ingredients," Ling Han said with a smile. "May I know what ingredients you require?" Xuanhuan asked again. Ling Han recited the list of ingredients he required. Xuanhuan had obviously been trained for a very long time. While she memorized the names and amounts of the ingredients, she even informed him of the prices of the individual ingredients. "Honored customer, your bill comes to a total of 320,000 silver coins," Xuanhuan said with a slight smile. Heaven's Medicine Pavilion needed to depend on the sale of completed pills to earn money. In case of ingredients, unless they were especially valuable, for example, like the second star grass, their price would only be a bit higher than their cost. Thus, even if this was a huge purchase, the profit made by the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion was really not much. As a result, the amount of commission she could earn would naturally not be much either. 320,000. Ling Han sighed. He only had about 100,000+ on hand. This was far from the amount that was necessary. But he wanted to concoct the second star pill as soon as possible, so he said, "Please inform Fu Yuansheng for me. Just tell him that Ling Han is looking for him." Fu Yuansheng, the pavilion master. Xuanhuan was stunned for a moment, before suddenly realizing. Immediately, she was so shocked that she had even begun to stutter. What kind of remote existence was the pavilion master? Aside from the Rain Emperor, there was no one who possessed a higher status than their pavilion master. Even the clan heads of the 8 great clans were only able to stand on equal footing with the pavilion master. And now, a young man actually said he wanted to see the pavilion master. This was naturally troubling to her. There was no reason for her to inform the pavilion master of this at all. "It's all right. You only need to tell him that I am Ling Han, and I believe Fu Yuansheng should even reward you," Ling Han said with a smile. That was natural. He, the Alchemy Emperor, was here personally. Fu Yuansheng would definitely be overjoyed. How would Xiao Ying dare to believe that? No matter how she looked, Ling Han looked to be only a young man of about 17 or 18 years old, so how could he possibly know the Pavilion Master? Even if the clan heads of the 8 great clans were here, whether or not the Pavilion Master would agree to meet with them depended on his mood. But in the training that she had received, the most important thing was not to offend any customers. Thus, she apologized and said, "At my rank, I am unable to personally see the Pavilion Master, so please wait for a moment while I report this to the branch manager." Ling Han would naturally not cause her unnecessary trouble, so he simply nodded, and sat down somewhere. Hu Niu saw him sit down and imitated him. She climbed up to Ling Han's lap, and similarly sat very earnestly. After a while, they saw Xiao Ying walked behind a man who appeared to be in his 40s and the pair was heading towards them. She looked to be in a bit of a panic. "Brat, so you're the one who wants to see our Pavilion Master?" This middle-aged man looked at Ling Han disdainfully. He had heard what Xiao Ying had to say. In his opinion, Ling Han must have been embarrassingly short of money, which was why he had deliberately said he knew the Pavilion Master, thinking of using this way to bargain for a cheaper price. He was really too naive. Ling Han's brow frowned, and he said, "You should speak more politely. If you have no money, then don't pretend to be so capable." The middle-aged man humphed, laughed loudly and said, "If you really do know the Pavilion Master, then I will eat this whole table." He pointed at a long table at one side. Ling Han put on a smile, and said, "I did not think you would have this kind of hobby. If I don't satisfy you, then wouldn't that be too unreasonable of me?" "You're spouting nonsense," the middle-aged man said coldly. Chapter 105, Conceding Defeat. "Manager Yuan," Xiao Ying called out to the middle-aged man in a low voice. Heaven's Medicine Pavilion had its rules. The first rule was, never, ever be impolite to any potential customer. The middle-aged man cast a displeased glance at Xiao Ying, waved his hand, and said, "Somebody, chase this poor brat out of here." Xiao Ying did not dare to say anything further. She simply looked sympathetically at Ling Han and Hu Niu. This middle-aged man's name was Yuan Gang. He had previously only been an odd jobs worker here, but unexpectedly, a few months ago, his younger brother advanced to become a yellow-grade mid-level alchemist, causing Yuan Gang's own position to rise, allowing him to obtain the position of a minor manager. Because he had struggled at the lowest level for a long time, now that he was in a high position, Yuan Gang had become extremely arrogant, always thinking of new ways to show off his present superiority. Ling Han was extremely unfortunate. He just so happened to be this guy's target. 2 sturdy, well-built men walked over and stood behind Ling Han. One of the pair spoke, "Honored customer, please come with us." Ling Han have a sigh. Did he really have to use force? Ling Han. Ling Han. It was at this very moment that a sweet voice was heard from behind him. Ling Han turned around to see that the speaker was actually Chizan Tai. Why was the 7th princess of the royal house of the Da Yuan king here? When he took a closer look, it seemed that both Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan were here too. In that case, it was only natural that the girl was here too. "Yo, never thought that a poor brat like you would have such a pretty wife." Yuan Gang gave an envious look, then said to Ling Han, "Poor brat, lend me your wife for me to play with for a single night, and I could give you a 20% discount." Ha ha. Pa. His face suddenly suffered a slap, his feet stumbled and he directly fell onto the floor. The one who had slapped him was, of course, Ling Han. "Bastard, you actually dared to hit me." Yuan Gang got up to his feet in a single movement, his face filled with thunderous rage. "So what? Can't you be hit?" Zhang Weishan walked over with a cold smile. "And who are you?" Yuan Gang did not even think, and immediately raised his finger to point directly at Zhang Weishan's face. "Wow. What?" he gasped in shock. There was astonishingly a silver badge hanging on this newcomer's breast. Perhaps there would still be some people who may not recognize this, but definitely not him, an experienced senior, who had been working at this Heaven's Medicine Pavilion doing odd jobs for over 10 plus years. A black-grade low-level alchemist. Yes, sir. He hurriedly bent his knees in a bow, an obeisant expression on his face. The only reason he was in the position of minor manager was because of his younger brother, yet his younger brother was only a yellow-grade mid-level alchemist. Compared with this esteemed black-grade low-level alchemist in front of him, the latter was on a complete different level. Master, this guy was very bad, Xuanhuan said immediately. Pooh. Xuanhuan instantly choked. This beauty was actually the disciple of a black-grade alchemist, and he had actually dared to flirt with her. Wasn't that practically seeking his own demise? He scowled miserably, and said, "This young miss, apologies for my smelly mouth, only knowing how to speak nonsense. Deserves to be hit. Deserves to be hit." He began to slap himself repeatedly with a pa, pa, pa sound. Young friend Ling. Young friend Ling. Zhu Hixin had also walked over, and together with Zhang Weishan, they raised their clasped hands in Ling Han's direction in greeting. Grandmaster Zhu. Xuanhuan had only at this moment spotted Zhu Hixin, and was so scared at this point that his whole face had turned pale. Unlike Zhang Weishan, who stayed long-term in Dayuan City to oversee the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion branch there, Zhu Hixin had previously always been in the Imperial City. How could Xuanhuan not recognize him? Yet these two black-grade alchemists actually performed such a respectful greeting to Ling Han. How could this not scare him witless? The two of you are here just in time. Help me call over Fu Yuansheng, Ling Han said with a smile. Zhu Hixin took one look at Xuanhuan, then said, "Young friend Ling, we don't have to trouble the pavilion master just to deal with a nasty character like this, right?" He was a black-grade low-level alchemist. He only needed to say the word, and this mere minor manager would be dealt with, no questions asked. Grandmaster Zhu, please forgive my blindness. Xuanhuan hurriedly began to beg for mercy. But after speaking these words, he realized that the deciding factor in this matter should be Ling Han, so he quickly turned back around, and said, young Master Ling, please be generous, and have mercy on me just this once. You've forgotten, we have a bet going on between us. Ling Han laughed. Grandmaster Zhu, please help me go and inform Fu Yuansheng, and ask him to come over. Young Master Ling. Zhu Hixin stepped forwards, and said in a low voice, you know Grandmaster Fu? Yes, I do. Help me call him over. I have something to discuss with him. Ling Han nodded. Then I shall immediately go call him for you, Zhu Hixin said quickly, turned around and left to do what he said. Within moments, Zhu Hixin and Fu Yuansheng were walking quickly over towards them. Naturally, Fu Yuansheng was walking in front, while Zhu Hixin followed behind. Ha ha, young Master Ling has arrived. Yet I did not come out to receive you personally, please forgive my slight. Fu Yuansheng said hurriedly. Xuanhuan's face had paled to a whole new level. So it was not just Zhu Hixin that revered Ling Han so much, even Fu Yuansheng treated him with such respect. Who was this brat? He was a little too awesome, wasn't he? Ling Han smiled at Fu Yuansheng, then looked over at Xuanhuan, and said, this bet should be counted as my win, right? Of course, it's your win, young Master Ling. Xuanhuan took advantage of the change of topic and immediately said in a flattering tone. Ling Han nodded, and said, all right, then you can start eating. Xuanhuan found himself suddenly tongue-tied. What is it? Do you need me to add some seasonings and cook it for you? All right, so do you want it braised or steamed? Ling Han said with a smile. Young Master Ling is really such a joker, Xuanhuan laughed awkwardly. I may joke around with my friends, but you are not my friend, Ling Han said calmly. What is going on? Fu Yuansheng interrupted, his tone already filled with strong displeasure. He and Wu Songlin had just benefited from Ling Han's teachings the day before, which allowed the two of them to see a flicker of hope to break through to become Earth-grade alchemists. for the two of them, Ling Han could even be considered as half their master. And now Ling Han was obviously expressing his dissatisfaction, so he naturally was also extremely unhappy. It was not very appropriate for him to ask Ling Han, and he would not be asking Yuan Gang either, so he directed his gaze at Xiao Ying. Yuan Gang instantly began to signal repeatedly at Xiao Ying with his eyes, hoping that she would be merciful with her words, and speak a few good words on his behalf. However, Xiao Ying pretended she had not seen his desperate look and recounted all that had happened earlier from start to finish. Fu Yuansheng was instantly enraged, and pointing at Yuan Gang's nose, he said, "How dare you? So you are already in the position that you can speak for me. Since it was your own words, then go ahead and eat." Yuan Gang's face twitched uncontrollably. This time, it was the command of the Pavilion Master of Rain Country's Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Even the Rain Emperor himself would have to give him some face. Looks like there was nothing to be done. Whether he liked it or not, he was going to have to eat. But still, how was he supposed to force himself to eat a table? He found his resolve, and with a "pa," ripped off a table leg, put it in his mouth and began to chew. Catcher. Catcher. He was in the 9th layer of body refining tier, so his teeth and strength were not too weak. It was easy for him to chew the table leg to bits. When the other staff members saw this, they all hid a smile. Yuan Gang was a nasty character that had been acting high and mighty after getting this position. There were quite a few people in Heaven's Medicine Pavilion who did not like the way he did things, but they did not dare oppose him publicly. They were naturally happy to watch the show of him struggling to stuff the table leg down his throat. Ling Han, on the other hand, was not interested in watching the magnificent feat of Yuan Gang eating the whole table. He said to Fu Yuansheng, "You should just fire this kind of person. This young girl is quite able, so just let her take over the vacant position." "I shall listen to young Master Ling's arrangements," Fu Yuansheng said very humbly. Xiao Ying instantly looked overjoyed, and when she looked at Ling Han, her eyes were filled with gratitude. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.